Good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. I have another wonderful opportunity to go around the world, the other side of the pond here, way down under. I've got Ian Dooley. He's an economic advisor for the Australian Workers' Party. Ian is a phenomenal mind when it comes to MMT and has got a great, great message. I'm so happy to bring him on. Ian, welcome to Real Progressives, sir. How are you tonight?
It's good to be here. It's midday here, but I'm pretty well. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm doing great. So let me just say that I've watched several of your videos. I've watched a whole bunch of them. Let's Get Fiscal. What a great name for a show. You've done some amazing little short videos that I think are quite honestly must-see learning experiences for people that are just getting started, and some of the more advanced issues as well. But you have a great gift for how to present this stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came into economics and how, more importantly, how you came into what I'll dub macroeconomic reality?
It actually began with a prescient experience with the alt-right. Although that word, I don't think it existed then. Maybe it was not so mainstream. But about 4 years ago, I was having a conversation with some friends of mine who started saying some very racist things and sort of bringing up Holocaust denial and all this stuff. And I had never even heard of it. Like I had no idea that there were people who denied the Holocaust. I thought that was completely crazy, right? So I was like, what? And I went online and I looked it up and I found out this whole world of just historical revision, like people just saying things didn't happen and whatever. So I gained this real appreciation for history. And I just started going to the library and getting history books and just reading, whatever I found interesting at the time. And eventually, like, history and economics are very intertwined. So I started reading economics books, and the thing, I then also started watching a lot of YouTube videos, like all the crazy kind of zeitgeist stuff, and then all the Four Horsemen stuff, and then just some kind of like economics 101 stuff with the curves and all the models and stuff. And none of it really made sense. And it was also inconsistent, and it was like internally inconsistent within the theories themselves, but also internally inconsistent within the profession of economics. And eventually I was at a garage sale and got this book called The Management of the Australian Economy, written in 1979, I think it was. And it's just this hokey little pamphlet. And that started to make sense to me. And what was in that pamphlet was the economics of the day, like late 70s, post-Keynesian. It was not MMT, but it was much better sounding than the stuff I had heard so far. And that primed me so that when I saw it was a David Graeber article, that really sensationalist one he did in The Guardian, like, all money is IOUs and it's just fake, blah, blah, blah. And in the comments on that article, someone had mentioned MMT. So then I looked up MMT, I found the Bill Mitchell demystifying MMT video. And because I had already been through all this stuff, I was like, okay, this makes perfect sense. I get it now. It was related to Australia, like everything else was related to the US. And so, immediately my life became torture.
Yes, I get it.
Because I used to like listening to the Senate. That was whenever I was driving, because I don't have a CD player in my car. I've got a really old car. So whenever I was driving to the train station, I would listen to the Senate. And I didn't find that enjoyable anymore. I was like, oh my God, something's got to be done about this. So you feel the pain of being a 1%er, a true 1%er in the truest sense of the word. That's right.
Once that light goes on, man, it's like you can't turn it off. It's like you've got to tell everyone the suffering is optional. We can do better than this. I
know, and you switch over, and it's like, oh man, okay, now I have to set about figuring out why I am different from like crazy religious people and fundamentalists and like climate change deniers. Like, how do I differentiate myself from other people who are going against the mainstream without just looking like, hashtag Pizzagate? And so that was the journey for me. I immediately just started thinking, okay, what's the best way to communicate this? And I started trying with my friends, and I started trying with my family, and just everyone I met from that time on. I would say, okay, I've got these 3 analogies to give you, and I would like practice my analogies. And the first one was I think a tub of water, a tap and a drain.
Yes.
And then you could say that it looks as if the tap sucks the water out of the drain, but that's not really what's happening. That's just what it looks like. And there were all these. I was just practicing. So that's I coined the term munsplaining to it's like mansplaining but munsplaining to refer to that practice of explaining modern monetary theory, particularly online. So it was just a lot of practice, and I've told that story over and over again, and eventually got to the chore chart analogy. That works really well, and people get that. And since then, have been working on these videos, workshopping them with some other members of the MMT community.
Well, okay, so talk to us. You had a specific video that you did with your daughter, or about your daughter, I guess, with the chore chart, and it referred to getting to watch a movie. Can you give us the Cliff Notes version of that? Because it was amazing. It really was.
Yeah, so basically, my daughters have a chore book. They get points for doing chores, and then they can redeem those points for rewards. And the rewards are obviously things like, watching a TV show, or getting to decide where the family goes on the weekends, things like that. They're not all TV related, but we are a little bit more imaginative than that. So what we have is a convertible currency. So if we can't provide the underlying reward, then we have to delay my daughter redeeming the points, and she might get really annoyed, and then she might lose faith in the points system. So to keep her happy, if the internet was down, I can rip out that page of points, fold it up, write the word tomorrow on it, and give it to her, and add a couple of points to it, as a reward for waiting. So you can redeem these points tomorrow. Now, at the time I do that, my points liabilities don't change. I already owed her the TV time. It's just that now I'm going to deliver it tomorrow. So the terms of the liability have changed, but the net debt position didn't change at the time that I issued her, that folded over piece of paper. And so that's how government bonds work. Now, because we don't have a convertible currency, we don't have to use our interest rate to defend an underlying commodity like I do with the TV. So if I have to, say she came back the next day and the internet was still down, we couldn't load the website, I have to add more points. Every day she comes back and I can't deliver the underlying commodity, I add more points. If you get to extremes, the points become worthless. So for a government that owes money in a foreign currency, for a government that has a gold standard, it has to use its interest rate to defend the underlying commodity or currency. For a monetary sovereign who issues its own currency issues its own non-convertible currency on a floating exchange rate, no such constraint exists.
So when you did this, what was your feedback? Because like when we try and do anything, I mean, literally, it doesn't matter if I simply say taxes don't fund spending. I get the inevitable, what does?
I think that's the most contentious statement that MMT makes.
Yes.
And it's true. Like, it's true. But I was thinking about this last night because I was thinking about this interview. And I've been talking a lot on our economics working group recently about this statement that taxes don't pay for things, because it's the thing that people have the hardest trouble with. And it is also like, if you reframe it as if the government can't tax, then it can't spend, which is true. Like, MMT recognizes that if a government that is unable to impose taxes cannot spend, then if you state it like that, it does sound like taxes fund spending. So it's like taxes enable spending, taxes, permit spending, taxes allow a government to provision itself. Those are all super complex statements. So I think that a better statement is, yeah, sure, taxes allow the government to spend, but it doesn't have to tax back every dollar that it issues. And spending comes first. So yes, we have to have taxes. Yes, people have to pay taxes, otherwise the currency is worthless. But imagine if you had the oil in your car and then every day you put the oil in your car, and then every day you took all the oil out. so that you could have it sitting in the can. And it's like, well, what's the point? It doesn't do anything in the can. What's the point of that? I could have 100 cans of oil on the shelf, and it doesn't do anything for my car. So I'm going to have an oil surplus, an oil deficit to my car, right? Because then my car is functioning.
Not at all.
Right. So I'm happy to have an oil deficit, so long as the car needs that to run. So I think we have to find more effective ways of making that statement, because, you know, in a sense, it's true that taxes like kind of fund, not really, but sort of enable spending. But that's a hard one. So I think that leading with the government is not revenue constrained, that points, you know, that money is like points, that debt is not real. I think that's a really important one, and that's a much simpler message. That the level of debt, government debt to GDP does not constrain spending. That's a very simple message. That there's no way the government can borrow its own currency. That's another simple message. So those are all things that are sort of independently verifiable from official sources. And you then, once people start to really ask questions, then you can get to the issue of taxes. But I think leading with taxes is a mistake.
Well, so let me just give a slightly different perspective. So Bill Mitchell wrote this great article called "Taxpayers Literally Fund Nothing." And it was one of the very first times where the light bulbs went on. And then another great article by L. Randall Wray came out that says, you know, what are taxes for, an MMT perspective. Mm-hmm. So the two of these put together kind of made the light bulbs go on for me. But the way I view it is this: I view two separate functions really unrelated to one another, in the sense of, you know, I can raise taxes, I can lower taxes independent of what my spending habits are. The concern is that at some point in time, there's going to be a deficit when you consider your sectoral balances, and that starts getting really, you know, tricky and ticky-tacky, and people are like, what did he just say? All right, whatever. And we got a tax to spend, right? But we don't. I mean, the taxes are what keeps the value of our currency where it's at. As long as we impose a tax on this dollar, and you have to have that dollar to pay that tax, it will always retain some value. The question is, to what degree do you have to tax to allow yourself to spend? And that right there, that question is always the one that drives the libertarians crazy and the deficit hawks crazy, as they think any kind of deficit is bad. We got to reduce the deficit and so forth. But in reality, truly, the acts are separate functions. Spending and taxing.
They're not constrained by one another. They're sort of they don't have to be matched at a 1-to-1 ratio. So another way of saying that is that there is a correct size of deficit, but it's just not zero.
Right. Exactly. So let me ask you a question. There's a lot of similarities between Australia and the United States, but there are some serious differences as well. You know, when we talk about MMT, what I think is really wonderful is that it's like an international language. It just is a study of what is. Can you, being that you've had to kind of read a lot more about the United States than you probably ever wanted to, can you talk a little bit about what you've observed as the differences between Australia's economy and the United States economy? What were some of the differences that you had to kind of, okay, that's an operational difference? Is there really anything fundamentally different that would drive a different set of equations?
I think that the mechanics of how Treasury bonds are issued on the primary bond market by the government when it deficit spends are different. So there's a more complicated system I think it actually involves private banks somehow. And this is, I think, what has led to a lot of the crazy conspiracy theories and a lot of the misunderstandings. Because if you trace through it, I've never actually done this for the US system, but I've looked at the Australian one, which is somewhat simpler, but still unnecessarily convoluted. So I think that that's different. I think that the legislation that you have that controls the issuance of bonds in order to deficit spend is different. So you've got like the debt ceiling, I think it's called, and that's a congressional thing. They just approve the debt ceiling. So that's like a willing default. Like they could willingly default if they didn't raise the debt ceiling. In Australia, we don't have an explicit debt ceiling, but we do have the Charter of Budget Honesty, which says the government should run what's called sound fiscal policy, meaning that eventually it needs to balance the budget, and the policy target is a surplus. So we have a bit more of a vague, we don't have a number that needs to be increased each time, but we have a basic sort of policy target, which is kind of worse, I think, because if you have a conservative government, they are much more aggressive at keeping that number down and targeting a surplus than a progressive government, even though neither of them really has an explicit target. So there's a lot more left up to the whimsy of the government of the day. And what we have at the moment is just an atrocity it's a trickle-down nightmare up in here. But apart from those sort of like legislated and operational differences, I don't know. You guys have this one of the major differences is that the US dollar is used for all oil transactions. So there's significantly more demand for the US dollar. What's that?
The petrodollar.
Yeah, the petrodollar. Yeah, right. Which is it's the US dollar. You guys have also done a whole bunch of there's a lot of countries that have their currency pegged to your currency. So there's a special place for the US dollar in the world economy as well, which I think differentiates it from the Australian economy. Probably has an impact on things like balance of trade. Like in Australia, if we were going to have a job guarantee, we would find our imports would get more expensive more quickly than the US would. The question is whether you want to, I mean, it would balance out. I don't think that there's actually a problem with that. We might find that, for example, my iPhone might be $3,000 instead of $1,000. But I don't know if you want to condemn 1.5 million Australians to underemployment or unemployment so you can have a cheap iPhone. That's basically where we're at over here. It's export-led growth, a lot of minerals going out, import everything. The entire economy is dominated by finance, insurance, real estate, mining, extractive industries, finance industries, really unproductive, tiny population, fearful xenophobic population, cowering behind our borders, terrified of immigration, and fundamentally quite racist. So I'm getting off track here. This is not economics, but it's
okay, man. It's all economics, man.
I think that Australia would have a different, there would be a different impact on balance of trade for Australia if we went down the path of a job guarantee than there would for the US. I just don't think it would be a bad thing, but if seen through the lens of, this mercantilist kind of neoliberal construction where we need export-led growth and we need to all this stay competitive kind of stuff, they would think it was a bad thing. So that's something that will be difficult to overcome. But if everyone has a job and they're happy, then they might see past that, right? You might be able to say, hey, look, your iPhone is more expensive, but you kind of have a higher wage and the housing's less expensive, so it kind of evens out. But it's something that when communicating this in the big league, if we really get into a position where we can influence policy, that's something that in Australia I think we'll have to address differently than you would in the US.
Okay. So let me, you are an economic advisor for the Australian Workers' Party. Talk to us a little bit about the Australian Workers' Party and its role in Australian politics.
The Australian Workers' Party was registered about a month ago, so it has no role in Australian politics. But it is the first, I think, certainly in Australia, but maybe in the world, it's the first registered political party to advocate a genuine MMT job guarantee. So I think that's significant on its own. I joined shortly after they registered. I had been working on my own party called the AEP, the Australian Employment Party, as soon as these guys registered, it was like, okay, they're socially democratic. You know, they're all sensible. Like a couple of the policies need to be reworked in terms of like tax wording and stuff. But the, you know, fundamentally they're accepting MMT, they've promoted a job guarantee, and all the rest is details. You know, it's not as if by the time we actually got to Parliament that we'd be able to walk in there and just dictate all the policy, right? We have to have positions that represent who we are, and for people to trust us, trust that we're going to make the right decisions and represent them and be on their side. But like if we get in, we're not going to be able to walk in and say, well, now, you know, like this, the taxes go like this. So what we're hoping for really is to get state Senate seats. We're hoping to get federal Senate seats. You know, House of Representatives, like that'd be great, but it takes longer and it's harder, I think. You know, so just being a political party that it gives you especially if we had elected representation. If you had elected representation and you were saying this stuff, then it would be newsworthy. Until that point, it's sort of like the press aren't going to listen to you. I don't know. Do you know anything about Google, like search engine optimization?
Just enough, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So you guys aren't in the optimum.
Right. So Google doesn't want to show you in the first position. Like Google doesn't want you to become important because they show you in position number one. They want to show you in position number one because you're important. Right. And the press is no different. So people say, like the press doesn't cover MMT. The press doesn't do this. The press doesn't do that. It's like, you got to do something important with it before anyone's going to pay any attention to you. Because otherwise it's like, you're just the same as all these other crackpots. So, you know, we've got a senator over here right now, Senator Malcolm Roberts, who is batshit crazy. Like, I will go on the record saying he is mentally unstable and should not be in a position where anyone listens to him at all. But because he is in the Senate, he only got 77 direct votes, by the way. He got in on like a party ticket after getting 77 votes.
Sweet.
Because he is in the Senate, he gets airtime to talk about how climate change is a hoax by the United Nations in league with the Chinese and NASA manipulated climate data. Like, totally crazy. But he gets airtime, right? So if our role at the moment is just to gain enough credibility with voters that we get something like a Senate seat in the state Senate seat, a federal Senate seat, something like that. And that's what will give us newsworthy sort of notoriety where we can get some airtime. We can start to get this discussion into the mainstream political discourse.
This is a big deal for me in particular. The reason I say that is, you know, I'm aligned with several upstart groups that are coalescing into a coalition outside of the duopoly that we're stuck under right now. And within that coalition, and even when you look at the Green Party, I mean, you know, as for all the, you know, bluster with the Green Party, they got 1% of the vote. And, you know, you can debate how many got screwed up because of voting irregularities, et cetera. Bottom line was, even with those things, it didn't come anywhere near winning the election. So with that in mind, we've got a big hill to climb here as progressives in the United States. Let's be fair, our country has been fascist for a long time. And we like to export our fascism wherever we can. Our neoliberalism, it seems to be our top export right now. And so as you're talking to me about how you would be penetrating your existing government and trying to get this word out and gain credibility with voters and the media and Google search, these are things that need to happen in our country as well, because we've got several significant hurdles. It seems like you guys have the opportunity to have many parties, you know, because you have like a parliament. We have a first past the post electoral system here, which really doesn't leave any love for, you know, the second place is first loser. I mean, there is no.
We're first past the post still.
Okay.
We're not like, so New Zealand has mixed member proportional representation, which is closer to what would be a more representative government. So we still have a two-party system. We still have first past the post. What we do have is preferences. So
Okay.
you can vote for a third party without throwing your vote away, which is important because people, they get funded based on the vote from the Electoral Commission based on the votes they receive. So that's what fosters, I think, a bit more of a
Okay. We had a little bit of a glitch there with Be Live for a second. Hopefully Ian will come right back. Give him a second to rejoin us. So while we're waiting for Ian to reconnect, Be Live has been sketchy lately, unfortunately. Give him just a moment, and we'll see if we can get him back. In any event, while he's gone, let me go ahead and just talk about a few things that are, important in my mind at the moment. The United States is full of mythology and full of itself, quite frankly. Its American exceptionalism permeates even progressives, even people who otherwise would be.
Sorry, are we back?
Oh, yes, you cut me off from having to tell a story I didn't want to tell anyway.
I got a phone call. Sorry, it interrupted.
It's okay.
So I think the important thing is, right, that if you go to, we kind of do the same thing here. We have a big focus on the national House of Representatives election. And there's a lot that can get done in state parliament. And I think the same is probably true for the US. By being a congressman or woman, having representation.
I think Ian may have gotten another phone call. All right. I'm going to give him just another moment to come back on. In the meantime, what I was saying previously is that, our nation is really, really, really steeped in a lot of lies, and those lies are the orthodoxy. So in order for us to make any headway within the parties, within the country, within our government, within the policy space, within the mind space, and be able to fix the problems that are there, this is not something we have to adopt. This is something we have to accept. Adopting it would be like, well, there's some alternative system. We don't have an alternative system. What we have is MMT, which is a description of macroeconomic reality. And it seems like Ian is back. Welcome back to the show, sir.
I don't know what happened there. It just froze. So anyway, the message I was trying to get out, I don't know how far I got, but state, Senate, Congress, they're all just as important. I think that there's a real focus on the presidential election, the prime ministerial election over here, but we can get more done, I think, and you can get airtime and press coverage if you're elected into any office of government.
Okay. So, all right. So when you're thinking about what your next steps are as the Australian Workers' Party and so forth, I mean, you guys have only been around for a very, very short time. How many members do you have so far?
It's something like 1,800. It's under 2,000 signed up so far. But growing quite rapidly since we launched, getting a good reaction. Everything so far has been social media driven, almost entirely Facebook, almost entirely videos. And that's been doing phenomenally well. What we have to do is start translating some of those people into email subscribers. We have to start getting people enlisted to do voluntary work on the ground in local communities. So politics happens face to face and with people you trust. So there's a certain amount of coverage we can get electronically, but in the end, we have to get in front of people. And it's those sorts of initiatives that will then start to produce front runners in terms of candidacy, like people that we want that are showing local initiative. They're doing well in their community, explaining this and getting support, and that we will then start to talk to those people about candidates. But the first step is to start coordinating, like using the reach we have. Like we've got a bunch of people from all over the country who are supporting us. And so we need to translate that into face-to-face interactions by showing how to, like putting up instructions. How do you run a town hall meeting? How do you get together with people, without any money and have a discussion about this stuff so that we can start to talk about real issues to people. And so that's really the next step, is just leveraging the online presence to create grassroots, ground level, face-to-face action.
I can tell you from our perspective, we're in the process of building out ourselves as well. Real Progressives typically has been seen largely as a social media phenomenon, that we just sort of go and do these live streams and so forth. But we're a lot more than that, and we have plans to be an awful lot more than that. And, I think some of the things you're striving to do as a party, we need to be striving to do as well as an organization. And we have people in place that are trying to do this, but just like anything, unless you're getting a paycheck, right? And unless you're actually able to step away from your day job and put the focus on this. When I went to grad school, I was putting in easily 50 hours a week on homework and reading and classwork and writing and everything else. It's kind of about the amount of time you've got to put in to make something like this happen. What are you doing over there in terms of this? How does that play out for you, as a member of this, as somebody who's advising on economics, as somebody who's trying to be a part of it? What kind of a level of commitment do you have to have, to be a part of it and make it successful?
Yeah, my involvement in terms of hours is much lower than other people in the party. So I run a business. I've got 2 small children. That takes up a lot of my time. So typically I have, about 6 hours a week to spend on, various projects. So it's important to me to know that when I have that time, I've got a list of things, that there's something on that list that I can do to be effective and get it done, and then move on. So, being a project manager and a software guy helps with that. I produce, I help people set up project management systems for a job. So, that's been a really important thing for me, is being able to organize my time so that when I have a window, I can be like, okay, great, I'm going to do this now, and tick a box, and that gets it done.
I'm going to make us go a slightly different way than just pure economics. So I'm a project manager by trade, program manager by trade, and we're trying to use freeware to do Real Progressives and things like that, like Asana and Trello, and so forth. Now, my day job, we use the normal things like Microsoft Project and Visio and things like that. What kind of tools does a small startup organization? Because, a lot of what people are doing is activism. That's how we get MMT out into the world as well. And I consider myself an MMT evangelist or activist. So, as you're building out a project and you're trying to really time box yourself properly, what kind of tools do you think someone could use on a shoestring budget to manage projects effectively, so that they can do a march on DC or a march on Sydney, or a march wherever, or plan the next rally or whatever? What kind of software do you think would be useful? What kinds of steps and methodologies do you think would be useful to make these things come to fruition?
Well, I use Trello for everything. I organize my entire life and business with Trello, and I've just started getting the other members of the AWP into Trello. So Trello to me is the game-changing level of project management tool. In itself, it has a couple of deficiencies, and that's why I think a lot of people try Trello and then they're like, you know what, it didn't have Gantt charting, so I'm going to go elsewhere. But because Trello has such an amazing API, there are a constellation of tools that sit around it that make it, I think, hands down, in a league of its own in terms of its configurability and its flexibility and just its ability to get things done and get out of the way. So it also has a great mobile app. You can use it for notifications. The notification system is really good once you tame it. It's the Trello notification system is really bad by default, but you can there's a couple of tools you can use with it. So I use Trello. I use a tool called Butler for Trello, which is an automation tool for Trello. So any workflow inside Trello you can automate with just text language. So when a card is added to this list, add this member, set the due date in 4 hours, add a comment, move it to this list. So you can issue these instructions with this thing called Butler. So that's incredible. I use another tool called Placker, Placker, which is a Gantt charting tool for Trello. Gives you that visibility across all boards that everyone always misses when they're using Trello. And then I also use a Google Sheet script called Pimp Trello. If you look up Pimp Your Trello Cards, you'll find it. It's a guy just made it and released it for free. I know, like pimp in the sense of decorate, not prostitute. So, so Pimp Trello, Placker, and Butler make Trello hands down the most incredible tool. I integrate Gmail with Trello via Zapier so that I can label emails and they go into the correct place inside Trello. So to me, that's like that's an optimal system, and I've been working on it for a while. I think that people are always going to need to use a calendar separately to their project management tool. So Google Calendar works great. It's free if you're not paying for it. G Suite is pretty cheap anyway. But I understand some people are on a real shoestring budget. So I think that Trello really is optimal. Like it's got good shareability. You can create a public board where people can go. It's got the right level of flexibility. Like if you just want to chuck a whole bunch of stuff into it, you don't have to worry about where you're putting it or how you're setting it up or am I using it the right way, because you just chuck it all in there and then you can work with it later on. But then when you want to get really structured, you can set your lists up, your processes, and your checklists and all that kind of stuff. So to me, Trello is the ideal tool. I'm going to be using it for everything. I'm going to get the rest of the AWP team onto it. But I think that, you start from that and then you build out. And the key is the methodology that I use. I'm sure you've read Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Absolutely.
That to me is the key. That's the key. Because if you want to be a part-time activist and still be effective without overwhelming yourself and giving up all of your family, like ruin your relationships, your family gets sick of you, whatever. If you want to do that, you have to be able to stop for 15 minutes and do something that's meaningful in that 15 minutes. And so you better have all of your priorities organized already, right? So read Getting Things Done, switch over to Google Drive, Gmail, Calendar, use Trello, look up Butler, Placker, and Pimp Trello. And to me, the combination of those things is just it's phenomenal, and it allows me to make a bit of noise and be pretty present with the team and contribute meaningfully, even though I have very little time to do it.
That is just amazing. I mean, when we walk around and just trying to get everybody to understand the basics of economics, but the basics of project management and stuff. I'm used to the elephant gun when it comes to what I'm using. I'm used to these big tools for big enterprise, and so these task manager type things drive me crazy because I'm a very visual guy. That's why I love Visio so much. I can put my pipe together, I can put my milestones in there, I can track on intervals, stuff like that, in a very easy to see visual. And so ticky-tack tasks drive me crazy. So the idea of being able to integrate some of these other tools to provide that Gantt view and things like that, it's great. Let me ask you a question. From an international standpoint, have you guys considered the power in numbers and expect, because this idea of a workers' party, I know it's Australian Workers' Party, the idea of being a workers' party in general is something that I've discussed with Ellis Winningham, offline, because, the idea of MMT being the great unifier, economics being the great underlying unifier for a movement, and then the fact that workers make up, 95% of the entire population? Yeah. I mean, this is the ultimate unifying package. So what have you guys, I know you're just starting where you're at, but have you given any thought to an international collaboration in terms of building momentum on several continents? I mean, this seems like I know you got to start somewhere, so I don't want to overplay this hand, but in talking now that I've got friends across the pond, now that I'm meeting people all around the world, I'm starting to realize that our problems, a lot of them are very similar, and they can be solved not necessarily exactly the same way, but conceptually the same way. So, have you all considered that?
So, the interesting thing that I want to just talk about quickly, which is not the question you asked. Maybe that's because I'm training to be a politician, right? But the word worker. So we had pushback from people about being the Workers' Party. That, it's just going to make you sound like a bunch of socialists. And we're not really socialists. We're social democrats. There's a difference. Socialism is like state ownership to the exclusion of private ownership. Like you can't have a private business in a socialist economy. And that's a disaster. Like having a single entity centrally, talk about project management, a single entity centrally plan an economy. Like, okay, we don't have the computers that can do that yet. Maybe in 3,000 years, when it's all artificial intelligence, that's when, socialism might work. But until then, we've got to let people solve their own problems to a certain extent and provide a framework within which that can happen. So we're not socialists, but people are like, I don't know, you might say that we're democratic socialists. Like we're social democrats edging into democratic socialism. But the word worker, people are like, it's like a guy with a filthy face and a pickaxe, and he's like eating bread, and it's in the 1930s. We're all workers. Like I'm a business owner, I'm still a worker because I've got to do work today. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I have to do for other people. I'm not doing it for me. So work is anything we do for other people. And unless you make your money by deciding where your money should go, you're a worker. Now, some people are part capitalist. They have investments or whatever. So they're part worker, part capitalist. But they should still be thinking about their interests as a worker. And I think one of the biggest tricks that neoliberalism has pulled is to make people think that if you're a business owner, you're not a worker. Because then that means that people sort of like vote against the interests of workers because they see themselves as aligned with business. So they sort of like shun all of the policies that would actually help them. And the other thing is to really democratize finance. So small-time investing and small-time stockbroking and stock trading has become, and also like things like property speculation, particularly in Australia, have become very, very popular over the past 20, 30 years. And even I was listening to this great podcast called Who Makes Sense. I don't know if you've heard that one. Who Makes Sense with a C, like CENTS. History of Capitalism podcast. And there was a literature, graduate student who'd done a study on art and literature about finance since the 70s. And it's been glorified. The idea that we should not work, that we should all be creatures of leisure, and that we should all be just making, like working smart and not hard and making money while we sleep. People love that shit. They're just like all about it. They don't want to work, but we all have to work because if no one works, then nothing will get done, right? So we've got to take back the word worker and remind people that it's not the income disparity between a minimum wage worker and a dentist who gets, I don't know, $250,000 a year, or a brain surgeon who's like $500,000, whatever. That income disparity is not the problem. The income disparity that is the problem is the income disparity between pure capitalists, people who are in finance and banking, who don't do work. All they do is decide where their money goes. That's the income gap there is just staggering. And that's what's producing the financialization of the economy, is what's producing all of the inequality. So we have to get rid of the class division among workers and say that we're all workers, and our common enemy are the people that are doing no work and getting all the money, right? So I think that's the first thing I want to say about any workers' movement, internationally, nationally, has to recognize that we have to start by recognizing like that a high-paid lawyer is still a worker, and that they have the same interests as other workers, and that by denying that they're workers, by allowing the word worker to have been co-opted by neoliberalism to be some sort of like socialist bogeyman or only apply to the lowest pay grade, where excluding a vast amount of political influence that could be marshaled to take on the real enemy, which is the global finance that those guys are making out like bandits.
Okay, so you guys have, I mean, we can trace this all the way back to the 60s, probably even before that, but really in the 70s, the whole Milton Friedman idea of pushing the plebes, pushing the proles to private debt during the valleys and getting out of debt in the high points has made us all debt slaves. And the capitalists, as you were, they gain money on your interest, on the interest. So as the financialization of our economy, your economy, the global economy, wealth inequality has balkanized us to such a great degree, because as we try to pay off our debt, somebody's banking on that money and we're still at zero. We may be less than zero and they're still going like this, earning all the interest off everybody's debt payments. This phenomenon is neoliberalism on steroids. And I think that people across the world, I'm learning more and more, do not get this. This is the problem. It's not, it cracks me up when people get mad at somebody for making a good living, like somehow or another they're the devil. The real devil has got nothing to do with workers, as you're saying. It really is the capitalist, the investor class that sits there and plays, chess with our lives.
The rentier class, as Michael.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
So I think that there's a couple of things about that. First of all, is that we have allowed ourselves to fall into the trap of demonizing national debt when the actual problem is private debt. So national debt is no problem. Private debt is a huge problem, but we pay no attention to private debt. And so that the decisions that have been made, of the financial deregulation decisions that have been made since Art Laffer got inside Ronald Reagan and Maggie Thatcher's ear in whatever it was, 76 or something, those have all been in the interests of huge money holders. And there's this great, I don't know if you've seen this video, it's called the Cardboard Box Reform. It's about the Congressional Transparency Act it's this very innocent seeming act that was signed in 1973 by Richard Nixon that basically allows vote buying by big lobbyists, and the lobbying industry has skyrocketed since then. So if you look it up, it's Cardboard Box Reform, it's on YouTube, very interesting watch. He cites a study which shows these two lines, and it's like, this is how things should have looked if Congress was voting in the interests of everyone. And this is how it looks because they're voting in the interests of the financial elite. So we have a situation where genuinely we have a corruption going on. And the ideology that has allowed that to propagate is neoliberalism, because it kind of makes sense that, the government shouldn't go into debt. Like people say all these things and they're not, it kind of gels with people. And then on the other side of it, you've got this weird, I know you mentioned libertarianism before, this weird marriage between libertarianism and fascism. It's like libertarians were more likely to vote for Trump than Hillary. But Trump is like anarcho-capitalism, right? It's like small government, but the money has to come from somewhere, right? So small government means big banks. So you can't have a you can't have no money. Otherwise, it's just tribes. The Dark Ages. That's libertarianism. A failed state is libertarianism. So if you're going to reduce the size of government, you have to allow banks to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because otherwise, where will the demand come from? You have to allow someone to inject demand into the economy. So all of these small government folks, whether they're like neoliberals or libertarians or just, I don't know, gold bug fanatics like Jim Decker, what's his name? Jim Decker's, Richard Decker. Anyway,
Dick Decker.
Mike Maloney's another one. He's got all those crazy gold videos. Like all of these people that want to constrain government spending, I think the reason that idea has gained so much mindshare and been so easy to promote, and like also I think even the universal basic income crowd, they get a lot of funding, and where does that money come from? And that's fundamentally like a libertarian thing. The UBI is like a libertarian sort of philosophically.
Yep.
And all of these ideas that seem to be aligned behind the libertarian sort of ideology, the government should kind of stay out of it and leave people alone, all produce a bigger banking sector. So you got to think, why do those ideas get more funding? Why do billionaires get behind those political movements? it's obvious that they're doing it because they make a shitload of money from private credit.
Absolutely. So, all right. So that was a great segue into the next piece here, which is, as we've talked about, I know who I follow in the United States, and really, I mean, I follow them all over the place. But you happen to be in a place that's got several very spectacular economists that we revere as well. I mean, we had Stephen Hale on the other night, who's a great guy, easy explainer. And I'm just going to say, quite frankly, I know that my previous guest, Ajamu Baraka, really, really enjoyed Stephen Hale's stuff. He enjoyed his video and he enjoyed the explainer that he wrote. But you also have Bill Mitchell, and you have another guy who touches on the area that you just spoke to, which is Steve Keen, who is directly tied to the private debt bubble that is going on all over the world. Have you been a student of Steve Keen's at all, or is he too much of a departure from MMT for you?
I found MMT before I found Steve Keen. There was a very public sort of exchange between Steve Keen and Bill Mitchell in 2009. So they each did a guest post on each other's blog, or maybe Bill did a guest post on Steve's blog. I can't remember. So since that time, at the time, Steve Keen wasn't an MMT guy. He's a money circuit theorist, so MCT, not MMT. Since that time, and to his credit, he has done a lot of work on reconciling the two. So rather than saying, well, that doesn't fit in with what I have devoted my entire life's work to, he's gone, all right, well, if this is genuinely true, I should be able to model it. And there's a fantastic YouTube video that he does. If you look it up, it's called Reconciling MCT and MMT. It all goes over my head because it's all crazy models and stuff. But he's done it. And so it took him 3 years to start from start to finish. And now I've actually spoken to him. He still has some concerns about balance of trade issues, but he completely accepts MMT. He doesn't. I've seen videos of him with Randall Wray and Stephanie Kelton doing a retreat or whatever. So he's on board with it, but he's not as much of a fundamentalist. So, which I think is good because he gets a lot of airtime. He gets a lot of press. He's been on TV quite a bit. He's the only economist that has publicly stated his support for the Australian Employment Party. So he's the only guy that sort of came out and said it, because economists, very wary about saying part of this party. Obviously, they have to be independent, even if the party economically completely agrees with them. They can't say I support this party because then all of a sudden we come out with a policy that's we want to bring back slavery, and everyone's like, oh, that economist is a slave driver. So obviously, but Steve, I spoke to him, and this was the AEP, not the AWP. And he was like, sure, I support you guys. He started retweeting us. He started retweeting some petitions that I was doing. So he's a great guy, and he's actually going to be, we're having a conference in the middle of the year. It's not the AWP conference. It's actually called the Right to Work. So there's a Right to Work coalition that some people are setting up. I'm involved in the working group for the conference on that. Hopefully I'm going to get the AWP signed up as the first member of the coalition. But that's basically looking at the UN Declaration of Human Rights, Article 23, that you have a right to decent employment. So that's coming up, and hopefully we're going to have Steve presenting at that. So he's involved in the movement over here. I've spoken to Phil Lawn. There's an interview I did with Phil Lawn on my YouTube channel about, if anyone wants to look that up. The YouTube channel is still called Australian Employment Party. Unfortunately, I haven't managed to change that branding yet. That's, I've only got 6 hours a week. I've spoken to Phil Lawn. We haven't done an interview with Stephen Hale, but Stephen Hale is a member of our Facebook Economics Working Group. So he provides advice and supports the economics message without being an ideological supporter of anything to do with the party. So, and then of course, the whole thing, the first person I spoke to when I came up with the idea of starting a political party was Bill Mitchell, who then put me in touch with, various other people. So the economists in Australia are on side with the job guarantee, with spreading the message about MMT. But obviously, very cautious about putting their name on a political party. So that's what I think the Right to Work Coalition is a good one, because it's more of like an apolitical convener of a conference of, it brings together people who may have political ideological differences, but all support the right to a job and a job guarantee, essentially. So economists are much more able to get behind that. It's kind of like the workers' movement that you were talking about. That's much more likely to attract the formal support of economists, whereas political parties really need to have, someone like myself who doesn't make a career out of economics, but happens to have done a lot of economics research, advising them about something.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because in America right now, the U.S., if we said right to work, you would have the progressives' heads spinning, because it's out
like
here,
this anti-union thing.
Exactly. It's just amazing.
I know, it's a problem. And that's just another example of this co-option of terminology, like that having anything with the word social in it is now associated with communism. And it's like, you can't be social? What about social media? Is social media communist? No. It's just crazy. Like, you can't use the word worker, you can't use the word social, you can't say that people have the right to work. God damn it.
They've co-opted it all, man.
Like, stop co-opting our words. Those are our words. Come on.
Well, hey, look, we're right up on the hour here, man. Let me ask you a question. Do you have anything that you would want a parting shot to give our audience, as far as, MMT, Australian Workers' Party, or just, Ian Dooley?
Okay, so anyone who's in Australia, go to the AustralianWorkersParty.org. So it's AustralianWorkersParty.org, or if you can't manage to type that, AUSWP.org will also get you there. We don't rank in Google for the word Australian Workers' Party. There's another Workers' Party website that ranks, and they're like crazy libertarians. So we're trying to resolve that as we speak. But so AustralianWorkersParty.org. Check out the AWP Economics Working Group on Facebook, and also the Australian Workers' Party page on Facebook. So that's a little bit of a plug for the party. As a general message for the movement, or people interested in getting behind the movement, go to the Intro to MMT Facebook group. Come to I've got a Trello board at the top of the AWP Economics Working Group with idea draft videos. If you want to come and comment on the videos, get involved there. We're going to put those up on modernmonetarytheory.com. But more importantly, getting involved online is good. Get involved in politics at a local level. We've got to stop going for moonshots. We're not going to get the president is not going to be the first politician to say this. Right? Even Bernie Sanders is as left as you have ever had, and he was being advised by Stephanie Keller, and he was still talking about companies need to pay their fair share and all taxes and all this stuff, right? So You're not going to, the president is not going to be the prime minister. The president is not going to be the first politician.
It still makes your skin crawl, though, does it not?
Right. So you've got to get counselors, and you got to get anyone can get elected to council. All sorts of idiots get into councils, right? So you got to get in at the state level, at the council level. You got to talk to minor parties, Congress people, at the state level, at the Senate level, write letters, coordinated letter, all of that stuff. That's what's going to make it happen. We can't just go for the moonshot where, I spent my 20s trying to write a piece of software that would get sold to Google for $1 billion. It doesn't work, right? You got to chip away. You got to be pragmatic.
I love it. All right, Ian, thank you so much. I do hope you'll come back soon. I really enjoyed this, and I really enjoy the connection that I've been making with you Aussies. It's been really, really nice you feel trapped sometimes in the way things are going down in America right now, and it's just nice to be able to reach across and be able to hear friendly faces that are saying the same language, economic language. We understand each other. So with that, and project management now too, so I'm very excited about that as well. And I will watch this over and over again to plug in each of those things. So Real Progressives is actually productive. So anyway, with that, sir,
you got to
thank
get
you.
Some Canadians. You know what's missing is we don't have any Canadians.
Well, tell me, name who do we have from Canada that I need to be talking to?
I don't know. Like, go.
Neither do I. Gotta find somebody up there and go, hey, mate.
Yeah,
all right.
Just drive up to Canada with a sign that says MMT here, and see who comes over.
There you go. All right. Well, look, sir, have a great night. Thank your family for giving us the time, and we'll talk to you soon, sir.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you, Steve.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye. And